Hey everybody, welcome to another week of Ryan and Rodrigo. And this week I'm super excited, I'm super curious about our guest because Justin here actually grew up
Hello.
in the same small town as me. He is from Canby, Oregon, a nice place to live, as we say. And he's here today to talk all about his world travels because while I am an expat, I don't live in the United States anymore. Justin has gone all around the world. And so we're going to get to where he's been, what he's been doing. But first, Justin, I am curious about who your like favorite teacher at old Canby High School was.
Canby High School, my favorite teacher. I thought you were going to ask about 91. I had a better.
I never went to
I'll
91. That wasn't me,
to
man.
91, yeah. At Canby High School, man. Well, let's see here. I would say, do you remember Mr. Nelson?
Yeah.
Mr. Nelson, well, I was really close. I'm still good friends with his son, Britton. We grew up down the street from each other. Um, he was a cool guy. I mean, I just like knew him very personally and stuff. So he
That's
was,
cool.
I got along well with him. And I always liked Mr. Jacks, his
They're
history class.
Jacks. I had class with him. I had freshman social
History or
studies.
world
Yeah, whatever it
studies.
was called.
I think it was called World Studies or something, or World
Yeah.
History maybe. Yeah.
Whatever it was. Yeah, I had him. He was nice. My favorite teacher, I kind of had an antagonistic relationship with. It was Mr. Minson for AP US history,
Nice.
and
Everybody always said he was so terrible and evil, but I had him for one term of history, and I always liked him. I mean, he's very knowledgeable,
yeah, he's
good
very
guy,
professional. That's what
very
I liked.
professional. Absolutely. I think for high school students, he might be maybe a little too intense or strict, but thinking back, he was a really good teacher, very professional, like you said, very knowledgeable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then the other thing, and Rodrigo actually probably has some more questions about Canby because I'm always talking about it. He doesn't really. But my question for you is: after being away from Canby so long, what's something that you like miss about that's special to Canby that you can't really find even in other small towns?
Boltano's Pizza.
Oh, that's great. And what is it about Fultano's that's so great? What makes Fultano's pizza the best?
I don't know what it is, man. I think it's just the nostalgia
Hmm.
of I grew up eating it. They had the Papa Special was always my favorite pizza: pepperoni, sausage, pineapple, and Canadian bacon. And it's funny. People always ask me in Brazil about how simple our pizzas are in the United States and stuff. I say, yeah, it might be simple and stuff, but I grew up eating it, and it's great for us. I miss that stuff.
I have a great pizza story about Ryan. One day we were at the school and we ordered tuna, well, tuna, maybe mozzarella. I don't remember. But Brazilian pizza, you don't. It's like saggy and it's mushy and it's especially tuna. It's like
Yeah,
moist.
yeah, right.
And I brought two plates and I gave one to Ryan. I said, "No, no, man, what are you doing? You eat pizza with your hand." I said, "Ryan, no, you don't have to do that. It's no, 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 no. You eat it with your hand." So
Yeah.
he ate the pizza with his hand because he couldn't.
Yeah.
He
That's
tried.
how we do it. That's how we do it. I actually have a similar story. I went out one time when I was first in Itajubá. There was a group of us. I taught at a school, a language school, where you had Spanish, German, English, and French. And so there were a couple Colombian. There's actually a fair amount of Colombians in Itajubá. A handful of professors and students at Unife, the federal university there. So, anyways, I was trying to be polite and being and trying to be Brazilian and eat with a fork and knife. And this Colombian guy looks at me and says, "Hey, aren't you American? You got to eat it with your hands like we do." I said, "Yeah, that's what I normally do, but I was just trying to when in Rome, right? Trying to do as the Romans, Brazilians do."
Yeah. Well, I just don't do that, man. I mean, even after 9 years, I'm still like, no, I'm gonna eat with my hands and screw you guys.
Yes.
But
Sometimes you just gotta stick to what you know. I do it too. I mean, it just depends on the situation, but yeah.
But like the Fultano's pizza, yeah. I just had like Domino's last night because like I really like Brazilian pizza.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
like-
But it is different, you know. I like them
different.
both for what they are.
Yeah.
Another thing I miss is Gold Dragon. Do you remember Gold Dragon Chinese
This
food?
terrible Chinese food restaurant.
I used to go there every Sunday after church with my grandparents. So it's one of those kind of memorable things that we always used to do, and yeah, classic Canby food.
I missed I guess you could probably find this in other places, but I missed the like slice of summer
Oh yeah,
festival thing at the park that every weekend they had like a local band come and play, and just everybody in the town was at the park hanging out, and the bands sucked. Like one was just a bunch of dads that played together, but the like atmosphere of everybody in the town just being together hanging out for a Saturday afternoon.
And General Canby days.
General Canby days. Yes. I took my wife there one 4th of July, and she like didn't believe that it was a real thing. That like we were there on the street, and like the classic cars were driving, and the mayor was sitting on top of one of the cars, and people were throwing candy out, and she was like, "You just like made this up for me today, right? You called a bunch of people to come and put this on just to trick me?"
Yeah, putting on a show for. That's where did you live in Canby, Ryan? I totally forgot what part of town you were in.
So when I lived in Canby, I lived directly behind the high school.
Okay.
On 13th Avenue there.
Right.
But then, like for high school, I lived way out. I lived by 91 school.
Yeah, that's where I grew up, out on Meridian Road.
Yeah.
Sorry, what is the 91 you guys mentioned before? And now
How about you explain it? You went there.
All right, so 91 is an elementary and middle school, K through 8, and it's a couple, I would say a few minutes outside of Canby, out in the sticks, real rural, as if Canby's not rural enough, right? It's literally the middle of nowhere, and
just farms.
It's out in farmland, exactly. And so that's where I went to school from kindergarten until 8th grade for 9 years, before I went to Canby High. And yeah, it's a very small town, rural community. There's where we went to church at Zion is like right across the street, and it's basically like the same community. Most of my teachers were also like my Sunday school teachers and people I knew at church and stuff. So it's just, very rural, small town, grade school and middle school.
And there was one high school in Canby.
In Canby, there was just one high school, yeah.
But there were two elementary schools or more?
There were several elementary schools.
Yeah, there are a couple in Canby.
Like 5 or 6?
Yeah, probably something like that.
And then just one middle school.
One middle school.
Yeah, 2 if you count 91, because it was K through 8.
Yeah.
And then the reason that it's called 91, Rodrigo, is that it was the 91st district.
Yeah.
And then they just never got around to giving it a name.
And they just kept the number. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it might possibly be because that like neighborhood, although it's not really a neighborhood, that area is called Whiskey Hill.
I was gonna say, before it was 91 school, it was called Whiskey Hill School. There was like the old schoolhouse right up the road from 91 when it was when I went there. It was like literally like one room, as the size of like a small living room, one classroom, like from probably the 19th century or something. Even I don't know when people. I mean, it probably is about that old because people started going to Oregon in like the 1850s and stuff. The Oregon Trail, 1840s, 1850s, good old Oregon Trail.
That's
Has
right.
Ryan ever told you about the Oregon Trail, Rodrigo?
The game, the video game.
That's like our claim to fame in U.S. history is our state, Oregon, is the Oregon Trail. When people started going there in those big they call them covered wagons, right?
It's like
And then
it's like the gold rush.
Now that was California. There was no gold
No,
in
I
Oregon.
know, but
That's
Oregon.
actually Oregon. You see, the ore is all gone. Don't go there. Oregon.
My God. Okay. All right. That's okay.
But then there was a video game. There was a video game that what everybody played and stuff. We even played it in school, like
Everybody
part of the
in
curriculum
Oregon.
and stuff. Yeah, well, I think so. I think in most Oregon schools, it's like a part of the curriculum.
Yeah. Yeah. It's classic. Lots of fun.
Right.
And that's actually where where we get the name. I'm just gonna say this because you're wearing the shirt. The Portland
Trailblazers.
That's
Yeah,
why they're
right.
called Trailblazers, because they blaze the trail out to Oregon.
Yeah.
Rip City.
For sure. Yeah. So unless Rodrigo, you got any other questions about Canby to check up on?
Not yet.
Not yet.
You
Or
need
maybe
to-
we'll come back.
No.
You
Yeah,
need to
I
do
heard
a
enough
fact
for now.
with what Ryan's
Enough
told
about
you.
Canby.
Yeah.
So then, what did you do? Like, I assume you went to college after you left Canby.
Yeah, I did. I studied at the University of Oregon,
Cool.
which is in the
Ducks,
hippie
go
town-
Ducks.
Go Ducks. And that's in the hippie town of Eugene, Oregon. So I studied Spanish language and literature and Latin American studies. And then I joined the Peace Corps, hoping to go to Latin America. And they sent me to Indonesia, the other side of the planet. So that didn't work out. But I was like, okay, I'm doing this for the adventure, for the life experience. I'm going to go anyway. And I
So,
wound
where in Indonesia did you go? Because it's the big place.
It is a big place. I lived in Java. Java is it's pretty centrally located. It's kind of, even though it's not the biggest or like the most central, it's considered kind of the cultural center. I think it's something like 60 or 70% of the population lives on Java. And I lived in East Java, in the east part of the island, in a very, very remote, even smaller town than Canby, Oregon. Yeah, and I taught English. I tried to teach English, but it's hard to teach to people that aren't super motivated and don't really, but whatever. The mission, the mission statement and stuff of the Peace Corps is more, they call us cultural ambassadors. They want us to just get out, learn as much as we can about the culture, because they send people all over the world. They want you to absorb as much culture as you can, teach the people there about your culture and stuff. So I taught at an Islamic high school, and that was quite a different world, really. Just in terms of culture and attitude and mentality and life, the way people live and think and stuff. I mean, things like the daily schedule, they pray 5 times a day and everything stops. People stop everything to go to the mosque. They stop school, they stop class, they stop work, they go to the mosque. And that really ends up dictating the daily schedule and stuff. So anyways, it was a very, very eye-opening experience.
How
Totally.
Sorry. How much of a outsider were you, and how much of an outsider were you treated? There's a difference between being an outsider, which I feel like in Brazil, but the Brazilian people treat me so well. They're so welcoming that it doesn't matter. But I'm curious if in Indonesia you had a similar, how was it there?
I would say it's a little more intense. It's basically like this. In Brazil, there's so much diversity that sometimes people look at you and they don't think twice. You look Brazilian until they hear you talk and they hear your gringo accent, right? In Indonesia, it's clear as day. The second they see you, you're white, you're definitely not Indonesian. So, the other thing is being out in such a remote part of the country, they're just, I guess the way I would say it is they're not used to seeing white people and foreigners, and they kind of make a big deal about it in a lot of ways. They sometimes they haul it. They don't mean any anything bad by it, but it kind of gets to be annoying. They don't. They're also very nice, very welcoming people, but sometimes they laugh at you. Sometimes they take pictures of you without asking permission. It's like, yeah, and then they would like try to justify it and say, "Oh, you would do the same if you saw an Indonesian person in the United States." I said, "I would absolutely not do that because that's very unacceptable in my culture."
Interesting. Like when everything shuts down for the country to pray, what did you do? Because everything was like, did you just go somewhere and hang out for however long that was, or what?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Most of the time it was during. So they pray. They have the dawn prayer, the morning, wake up, sunrise prayer. So I was normally. I mean, I would try to sleep, but it's impossible to sleep when you have they call it the azan, the
chant,
call to prayer. Yeah, that comes out of the mosque. There was a mosque right across the street from me, so that was but like during the lunchtime and the evening prayer, during the lunchtime prayer, I was at school, so I would stay in the teacher's room. I mean, I went to the mosque, with them sometimes for the communal gathering and the social aspect. They invited me, and so I tried to participate. But most of the times, I would just stay in the teacher's room, and then in the evening, I would just kind of stay in my room or do my own thing. During Ramadan, they make a point to make a community gathering during the first evening prayer because they don't eat; they fast, right, all day. And so they come together, and it's a very, symbolic community thing. And so I would go to the mosque during Ramadan and eat with them. But otherwise, I was kind of just left to do my own thing while they all went to the mosque and prayed. It was, and I just want to go back and say they, for all the weirdness, being pointed at and laughed at and stuff. In my community, I did feel very accepted. People that knew me and with whom I worked and stuff, they were very nice, very welcoming people. But I think there's this element of kind of a disconnect with just not being used to seeing people from other countries that's just, they think, they giggle, they kind of make a big deal about it. I think it's just, a matter of being familiar and unfamiliar. In the United States, I thought the whole time, I was there, it just made me realize in the United States, we have so much diversity. That's why I tell them I wouldn't take a picture of an Indonesian person or point at them and laugh because, we're used to that. We see people from different countries, different cultures. In Brazil, too, there's so much diversity. It's just a normal thing to see people of different colors, ethnicities, religions, whatever.
How long were you there?
It was a 2-year. It ended up being about 2 years and 3 months. We had about 2.5 months of training in a small village, and it was hilarious. I got thrown into a host family house, not speaking a word of Indonesian, and we did intensive language training. But for the first week, I had a 60-year-old host mother. And it was just me and her. We could barely communicate. And we did that, intensive language cultural training for about the first 2.5 months. And then you get your official assignment. They send you to all the volunteers go to different places. And so, it was a little over 2 years in total.
Well, I have one question, not specifically about Indonesia, but I think this is the second time in our episodes in our show that someone mentions the Peace Corps. I don't remember if we have anything like that in Brazil, or if we do, like it's not something we talk about. What is the Peace Corps? I hear a lot about it in I don't know, American people talk about it.
Yeah.
What is the Peace Corps?
It's a volunteer organization. It was created actually back in the 1960s under President Kennedy, JFK. And it actually did exist in Brazil during that time, but because it's operated by the federal government, they're very particular and very careful about countries they go to. And so anytime there's any type of political instability, any type of, something that can cause potential, tension or anything that would make for an unsafe situation for volunteers, they're very quick to take the volunteers out. So they left Brazil, what was it, 1967 when the dictatorship started?
64, 67
yeah.
got hard.
Okay, so maybe they left already in 64, actually. But I remember reading that it did actually exist in Brazil, because I think it started in 62 or 3 or something. And so it was in Brazil at the very beginning, but it didn't last long, unfortunately, because of the dictatorship. But it still is. At the moment, as far as I understand, they've taken everybody back to the United States because of the pandemic. But before COVID, they did. I know Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, and maybe 1 or 2 other countries in South America had it.
And what are some of the things that they do? Is it just teaching English or?
Excuse me. English is their biggest sector, but they also work with agriculture, health education. I know in like Africa, they do a lot of HIV education, HIV/AIDS awareness education. In the Caribbean, I know they have some like water sanitation programs and stuff like that. So they have a variety, and also I've seen some stuff related to environmental the projects and education. It's mostly education based, I would say. Even in all these different areas, it's mostly education, but they do actually have projects, they're not necessarily education based, but more proactive in actually developing sanitation systems, environmental systems, stuff like that.
Okay, that seems very cool.
When you wanted to go to Latin America, what did you have a dream of what you wanted to do? Did you want to come and teach English? Did you want to go to some country specifically? What was your idea?
I imagined I would probably end up teaching English, just because that's kind of like the easy way, with especially somebody who has a college degree and no qualifications other than that. But yeah, no, I actually didn't really have too much of a specific like aim or dream. I had studied abroad in Chile, and so I really liked Latin America. Like I said, I studied Spanish and Latin American studies, and so I've always really liked the culture. I wanted to continue, living and learning about Latin America by living there and stuff. And no, I didn't actually have a particular aim. I was 22, fresh out of college, and just ready for an adventure around the world, basically.
Okay, cool.
And how about you? How did you end up in Brazil, right? I mean, I know you married a Brazilian, and did you meet her in Seattle?
Yeah, so we'll do the shorter.
Wait. Was she a Ciências Sem Fronteiras student?
No, it's actually even more random, because let's see. So I'll try to give you the shorter version, because the longer version can take quite a long time.
Okay.
So back in like 2000, 2001, one of my oldest friends today, he came to Brazil for like a study abroad, for a travel thing when he was in high school. Mm-hmm. And while he was here, he made a bunch of friends, of course, as you do. And one of them happened to be my future wife. Then 10 years later, she is working for Air Canada and has like flight privileges. She can go standby. And she is, and still, a huge fan of all of the grunge bands like Pearl Jam, Nirvana. And so she wanted to come to Seattle. And Tom, this guy, and I were roommates at the time. We were living in Bainbridge Island. Do you know where that is?
That's up in Seattle?
Yeah.
I used to live in Seattle
it's
a lot.
there.
Yeah, I used to go to Seattle when I was a kid because my cousins lived up there, but I don't really know the city by name of place and stuff. I
It's
know the space name.
you just take a ferry from downtown Seattle about 40
Okay.
minutes and you're there.
Uh-huh.
And so I was living there with Tom, and she came to Seattle and stayed with us for about a week. And then I married her, and Tom married her friend that also traveled with her there. And because at the time I didn't have a job, I was unemployed. And it made more sense for me to move to Brazil than for her to move here, to move there.
Uh-huh.
So then I came to Brazil in 2012.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
when I went to Indonesia, 2012.
It was a big year for expatriation.
Yeah, for Canby folks to be shipping out around the world.
We were spreading the good news of Canby.
Yeah.
So then you finished in Indonesia, and what got you? Why did you go to Brazil? What happened there?
So, yeah. Well, I basically, because the Peace Corps didn't let me go to Latin America, I was still, kind of fixed on that plan or that idea. And I was looking for teaching jobs. Since I had teaching experience, I figured that'd be an easy way to go back. And so I was kind of just looking around. I didn't really have a particular country or place in mind, but I had studied one semester of Portuguese, my first semester of college. And I always kind of had this idea in mind of I was either going to go back to get really good at Spanish, or I always kind of wanted to go to Brazil so I could expand and do something new. And so I found this job I was just searching all over, random places all over the internet. And I found a teaching job at a school in Itajubá, of all places. And I guess if I were to say I had one criterion, it was that I was too intimidated to go to a big city like Sao Paulo or Rio.
Okay.
Especially not speaking the language. I was like,
that
no
finally
way.
makes sense, because they really didn't understand how you ended up, in Itajubá, because there are teaching jobs everywhere for gringos.
My God, everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I got in touch. Yeah, that was basically, I ended up getting an email back from at the time, he was the coordinator at the school. His name's João. And despite his very Brazilian name, he was actually born and raised in Connecticut. But his dad is from Rio Grande do Sul.
Okay.
So he is half Brazilian. His mom is and it's funny because he's brown, and people think he's brown because he's Brazilian, but his dad is like as white as us. But his mom is Puerto Rican, and she's very dark. That's where he gets his colors. So anyways, he responded to my email, and we joke about this to this day. He's the lead singer in my band, and he actually joked about the fact that he's like, "Oh, I see here on your resume you play bass. We actually have a band here, and we need a bass player." And we kind of joked about it, but I got there, I brought my bass, I took my bass to Brazil, and on the first day I lived with João and another American guy named Jimmy, the guitarist in our band, one of the guitarists in our band, I should say. And we started jamming the first day I was in Brazil, and we played a show 3 days later.
You guys just jailed instantly.
Yeah, it was just there, and we all, the three of the five of us in the band lived together, and so, we were jamming, we were playing a lot of music, and one of the things I missed the most about living in Indonesia, from the time I was a teenager, I dreamed of being a rock star. I started playing in a band, and in Indonesia, I was like, okay, this isn't going to happen. I got to give up that dream and get on with my life. I hadn't really done anything music. I bought an acoustic guitar and I practiced and played by myself, but I hadn't played with a band or done anything. So it was actually like really it's kind of a surprise, random thing that got me excited about music again. And yeah, it's been a great experience. We're working on finishing up recording and mostly producing now our third studio album. And
even though you left, you're not there anymore. You guys are still recording like remotely?
Yeah, well, I have a couple parts. I got most of my parts done. Most of it's in the production phase. I still need to record a couple songs, but most of my parts are recorded. and it's mostly just our vocalist and our other guitarist who have to finish up recording their parts. And so, yeah, it's amazing. This whole, we've learned so much over the last year and a half. We, not just us, the band, like the world, about how much you can do online at a distance, right? So, yeah, the recording part, you obviously have to go somewhere with equipment to record and such. But after that, producing, at a distance is actually a very possible scenario for us. And so, yeah, we're still working. We did a live. We hadn't played a show in like a year and a half because of the pandemic, but we did a live at the end of last year, and so that was pretty cool. We were able to get one show in before I took off.
Is it still on YouTube?
Yeah, it is actually. I'll find the link and I'll send it to you guys.
Yeah, please.
Cool.
Yeah, it was cool. We did it at there's a theater. Couple Itajubá, it's a very small town, but they've started to develop a lot. There's now a movie theater. We didn't have that when I moved to Itajubá in 2014. That's kind of a big deal. We didn't have a movie theater in Canby growing up either.
And they got one right after I left.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. So they got a movie theater. They got like a municipal theater where they do a lot of shows like this and stuff. I've also gone there for dance performances, plays. They do all that kind of stuff. It's pretty cool. So anyways, we played there and it was a great show. It was a really good time. And I'm planning on going back to Brazil, even though I'm out for now. I plan on going back at least hopefully every year or every other year or something. So I think for now, things are kind of have to be on pause anyway because of the pandemic. But I think the band is something that can still, keep going, just in a more remote way like this, producing at a distance and doing shows in a more limited manner like this, given the restrictions.
Yeah. So we kind of skipped over your time in Itajubá and went directly to the band and such. I don't know. Rodrigo, do you want to ask him about like teaching English and these things and how it was in Itajubá, since you're a Brazilian and you have more knowledge about Brazil?
Well, I know a bunch of American people that teach English.
Right.
And each one of them have a different way of teaching, different personalities, different ways of teaching, of course. There was Travis, who was from Texas, probably chewed tobacco. He was from a small town in Texas called Hooks. He had a family member called Bubba, and that made me laugh a lot.
Bubba Gump was his last name, Gump?
Not really, but and he said, "Oh yeah, Bubba, I think brother or brother-in-law." That was funny. And so there's Kate. Kate is from Utah. Then there's and she's a sweet girl and completely different. Travis was crazy. Then there's Kate is crazy, but in a different way. All of you guys, Kate, you, Ryan, Travis, Kip, maybe not, but most of American people are curious about Latin America, are curious about. Kate was always very curious about the Middle East, and I've always been curious. What are you guys so curious about? Like, I don't mean that there's nothing to be curious about. I don't mean in that way, but growing up Americans, what I don't know, what motivates you to have that curiosity,
Yeah, I would say, growing up in Canby, Canby's certainly not the most diverse of places, but there is a sizable Hispanic population, and where I went to, especially out in the countryside, there are a lot of Mexican. I had some Mexican friends, some Colombian friends. There was a Guatemalan girl. I think just kind of hearing Spanish is what kind of got me initially interested. It was kind of something that sparked like a curiosity about a different exotic kind of a part of it. I'll admit is kind of an exotic Latin America, I think, I don't know about you, Ryan, but I think in general, we kind of see Latin America in some ways as a very exotic place. They speak different languages. We think of Brazil as having a lot of jungles and beaches and stuff. But really, I would say the first thing that sparked my interest was, growing up around some Latinos in Canby. And then specifically with Brazil, it was that first semester. I decided to stop. I had studied Spanish all through high school, and I decided to try something new. So I took Portuguese 101 with Simone da Silva she's also from Sao Paulo, by the way. And yeah, we watched a lot of cool video. Another thing I will say specifically about Brazil is the music. The music is certainly something. Actually, Latin America in general. I love Latin rhythm. I think Latin America is very rich in its rhythms, its musical styles. And so I would say as a musician, that was also something that always really kind of got my attention and made me curious.
Any particular artists or bands, Brazilian artists or bands you remember?
At the time, I couldn't even mention one name of anything. I heard the name Tom Jobim, as we say in English.
Okay.
But I knew more of like the general styles, like bossa nova. I love bossa nova. I think it's one of the most beautiful styles of music in the world. And at the time, I wouldn't have been able to tell you anything. But nowadays, I like, and I'm still not really good with names, but I really like, I like Criollo. Do you guys know Criollo from Sao Paulo?
Yeah.
I like Baiana System is a band I started to listen to more recently. Tom Jobim is also still, I think, a classic reference of good Brazilian music. Vinicius Moraes. Like I said, I'm terrible with names. The names
That's
are all
okay.
Another one. I studied him first as a political figure before a musician in one of my Latin American history classes was what's his name? I'm forgetting his last name. Chico Buarque, yes, exactly. We studied him in one of my history classes, so I actually knew him as a political figure before I got to know his music, but he's another one who I listen to. Chico Science, I always confuse the two Chicos, but I like Chico Science too. So anyways, I would say those. And then when I got into college, as a Latin American studies major, we study a lot more of the political, economic, historical complexities and issues. And so I guess some of those things also kind of got me curious.
Political complexities in Brazil? Huh. No, I don't think so. Hey, this is just...
No, I'm just making that up. I was just throwing that in there to see if you paid attention.
Political complexities. Where everything has always been...
How could it be complex? There's only like 40 parties. It's simple, man.
Oh my Lord. I got to Brazil in August of 2014. And
good timing, by the way. That's just excellent.
Excellent.
I had the good sense to arrive at the peak. You're coming in like it's obvious it's going down. That's like joining the Titanic after it hits the iceberg. Come on.
You came to play in a band. You're right. The Titanic band.
Yeah, so that I got there right in time for Dilma's re-election, and then things started really getting interesting, right? The impeachment, Fora Temer, Fica Temer. Oh Lord.
Simple question. People from Itajubá, what impression do you have on their political views? Like, is it more of a conservative? Because usually in America, small towns are more conservative.
Mm-hmm.
What about Itajubá? Was it more conservative? Not really.
Yeah, Itajubá overall is certainly more conservative. I think I heard a statistic of something like 70% or 75% voted for our great friend Jair.
Right.
So it's, statistically it's there, and you can see that. But I feel like in my experience, because I play in a band, I know a lot of artists and bands, and I studied at Unife I've worked with a lot of students. Most of my students are either business professionals, but actually, because now I work as a freelance, and so I work more with business professionals at this point. But when I was in Itajuba, I would say at the language school where I worked, like probably 80 to 90% of our students were Unife students. And so that demographic is certainly more, and actually, a lot of those students are not necessarily from Itajuba either. There are a lot of students from São José. There are a lot of students from other parts of Minas and São Paulo, São Paulo State, also from São Paulo City, but mostly from smaller towns in São Paulo State. But so my kind of experience and the people I have contact with and stuff, I would say is a lot more balanced and even more liberal. But yeah, Itajuba at large, and statistically speaking, it's very conservative. Yeah, it's a very conservative, typical, like you said, small town, very conservative.
But it's the impression I have of conservative people in Brazil is that they're not really conservative. They, well, in Portuguese, the verb to be is two verbs, so it would be better for this occasion. But they're not usually conservative. They are at the moment.
Right.
Right. They have conservative ideas, but when you talk to them, you would never guess.
I totally agree. Yeah.
And then you say something, and they're like, "No, I hate that. That guy is stupid." And you say, okay, all right. And then, but you can't just talk to them, and you would never realize, right? It's sorry.
I feel that too. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I totally agree. I feel that too. And it's funny, you talk to some, you would never guess, like you said, you'd never guess they're conservative until the second some political issue comes up. It's all of a sudden, it's like a switch goes off.
Or progressive, even. It's just so. Another question now about English. You taught English in Indonesia, and you said it was difficult to teach because they were demotivated, or I don't know. So what was the difference between Indonesia and Brazil? Different or what?
Yeah, very different. For that reason that you mentioned, a lack of motivation. Also, kind of the culture of a classroom culture, school culture is very, they tend to study things in a more like they focus a lot on memorization, and they don't really, I would say, between the religious culture and kind of the Javanese, traditional Javanese culture without being Islamic religious culture is very, they're not really taught, they don't encourage a lot of free thinking or critical thinking, I guess I should say. And so they're actually very good at memorizing things. When you give them a vocabulary list, they'll come back the next day and they'll recite it for you, and it's actually impressive. But the idea of actually, going beyond that and thinking and applying language and stuff is not necessarily like a strong point of their education. A lot of the lack of motivation that I felt and that I saw and that a lot of the other volunteers expressed, I think a lot of it comes from, in a way, I kind of came to understand and even kind of just accept it, because for a lot of them, it's not a very practical thing. They're going to grow up, they're never going to use English, and so they see like, why should I be? And I kind of, on some level, would reason with them and say, I understand that. So I tried to start focusing more on just that aspect of being like a cult. What did I say earlier that the Peace Corps uses?
Cultural ambassador.
Yeah, that's the term they use. There's also, for what it was, I would say that I have to be very careful with my words here and when I talk about this, but you could almost call it something of a xenophobic culture towards Western, in my case, what they specifically see as American culture, but kind of Western culture at large, because they're very conservative in their religious beliefs. They're very anti-alcohol, anti-drugs, anti-sex, and they see these things in our culture, especially thanks to Hollywood, right? And they're very critical, and sometimes even they end up being very xenophobic, and critical, because of these things that they know, or sometimes in some cases assume. An example of this was, I remember they had like these posters. They did like kind of a protest against Valentine's Day. They were protesting what they believed to be the day of free sex. And I was like, this is ridiculous. This is not even accurate. Like Valentine's Day, we go to school, we give our friends. It's not even about romantic love. I mean, it is obviously, but it's not just that. We go to school, we bring cards and candy for our friends and stuff. Where did you get this idea of free sex? So that also made it kind of difficult. And again, I think this contributed to the lack of motivation, because they kind of resist, in a way, kind of resistant to this culture, what they associate as that.
This reminded me of something I meant to ask you earlier, and did you feel like there was some anti-American sentiment there because of the whole like war on terror, the anti-Islamic messaging that had gone on in the United States for so long? Was that there?
Right. Certainly. I would say, though, it wasn't as bad. I can't imagine what it would have been like as a volunteer there during the Trump administration, because when I was there, Obama was president, and not only was Obama a lot more, diplomatic and open-minded about these things, but he also lived in Indonesia when he was a child, and they love him. They love Obama. They'd always talk about Obama, and so I would say, but yeah, the Peace Corps. They're very organized. They would send us I remember at one point there was, I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was the Innocence of Islam was like this video that was released online, and it depicted Muhammad, the prophet. In Islam, it's totally forbidden to depict any of that. You never see a picture of Muhammad like you see Maria and Jesus, or Mary and Jesus, in Christianity, because it's totally forbidden to depict any of the prophets, and that's like very offensive. So we got messages saying like, avoid going to these neighborhoods where we've seen resist, especially like anywhere near the Australian, the French, the American consulates. Be careful, don't go to these places, because we have heard reports of violence and stuff. But again, like at one point I remember getting into a debate with a counterpart teacher at the school, and he was trying to tell me that Osama bin Laden was a great person, and that I was brainwashed in the United States because of the war on terror and stuff. I said, look, I'm not just saying this as an American. That man killed a lot of innocent people. I don't think it's just but yeah, there were certainly these types of misunderstandings and this type of kind of American anti-Western culture because of these things. Yeah, the war on terror. They're also very critical. A number of issues came up about like Israel. They're very, generally speaking, anti-Israel, and they see that the United States strongly supports Israel, and they don't like that. So yeah, there are like I said, day-to-day stuff in my community. People knew me. We were all very comfortable accepting. Sometimes we had these interesting conversations, but at large, yeah, there is, I would say, to a degree, a kind of anti-American or anti-Western culture and stuff. Certainly.
How easy or hard did you find it to pick up these languages? Like, you said that you studied for a semester of Portuguese, which is not really anything at the end of the day. Yeah. And you went to Indonesia with absolutely nothing. So yeah. How difficult was it for you to pick up these languages and then communicate with the people that you were with?
In Indonesia, it took some time. We had like 35 hours, I think, of intensive training a week. So it was, that's at some point it was just like too much information. You can't even absorb that much and process. And
it's too fast.
Yeah, exactly. So it took a lot of time, for that information to all sink in and to be able to use it. I remember there are actually a handful of words that come from Portuguese in Indonesian because of the colonization, right. and a handful of Spanish words too. But otherwise, learning Portuguese was not necessarily easier, but it's a lot more similar to some. It was a lot more familiar, I should say, because I had studied Spanish. Indonesian was like going back to zero, nothing. You know, there were a handful of Portuguese, Spanish, even English words from the colonization, but otherwise it was like back to nothing. And the language itself is actually, I would say, in terms of structure and complexity, is far simpler than a language like English or Portuguese or Spanish, but it doesn't necessarily make it easier to communicate because they, for example, they don't have verb tenses. They don't distinguish
One of
past,
those.
present.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, that sounds easy. You don't have to memorize all these
Oh.
verb conjugations that you have in Portuguese, especially. Like, well, it sounds easy, but communicating is not easy because you have no idea.
Yeah, it's just like in English, you know, Brazilian people are like, oh, English is so simple because you don't have a million conjugations of the verb.
I love when
And then
people
you're
say
like,
that.
yeah, but then you just have to learn all this context. So
Exactly.
it's not
Exactly.
actually simpler.
Exactly.
Eh.
And that's another thing, actually, back to your other question, Rodrigo. Another thing that made it, another thing that was a big challenge in teaching English was teaching them the concept of past, present, and future. You know, they would say, what's the difference between went and go? So, well, you know, go is the present, went is the past. They say, yeah, what does that mean? It's like, oh, you don't understand the words. You're missing the concept, you know, bigger than the words itself. So that also makes it, I would say, it's very conceptually, I think English is far more complex for what they're used to, and that also makes it very difficult for them to learn, you know, English and stuff. But anyways, yeah, I would say after we had 10 weeks of intensive training, I was able to communicate, but it was like, you know, just enough to get by and to to be able to communicate with my host family and to get by day-to-day things. It really took at least a good year before I actually felt like I could have more evolved conversations, you know, with people and stuff. Portuguese also took a while too, because I remember, you know, studying abroad in Spanish, or in Chile, it was like my life was in Spanish. You know, I went to the university, I had a host family, it was all in Spanish. I got to Brazil and my life was teaching English. So everybody wanted to speak English with me.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, how am I going to learn Portuguese when nobody speaks Portuguese with me?
That's exactly how I feel. And it's one of the reasons that I haven't, it's 9 years, you know, so I can speak Portuguese now, but I also can't speak Portuguese. You know, like if I have a typical conversation with somebody about day-to-day things, I'm fine. But if I want to convey like deeper philosophical thoughts about anything, I get lost in 3 sentences. I'm done. And
say you're a B2 student.
Yeah, nah, B1. B1.
Yeah.
B2 students are much better than. And it's because I do everything in English, and I can't do things like. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
Because
I
my
felt
whole
that.
day is just English, and what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. I felt that for a while in Brazil, and then I did my master's degree at Unife, and that was when I was like, okay, it's go time, because if you're gonna study at a university, you have to write, you know, give presentations. I was like, okay, I better start actually learning this stuff, because now it's more than just survival. It's like, you know, like you said, you have to have more developed, you know, intellectual philosophical conversations and stuff, and write and present about it and stuff. So that shaped me up. But again, I would say Indonesian, I had to start from nothing. Portuguese, at least I had a solid background in Spanish, and although obviously they're not the same and there are a lot of false cognates and stuff, you got to be careful. It helped a lot because, you know.
Well, you had the structure, the like grammatical idea of how things ought to be.
Yeah.
And
It's the West. It's completely different, right? When you go to it's different. Like conceptually, it's just very different.
And like even like learning Portuguese for me is not totally crazy. Especially like, I think a lot of the like political science that I studied helped because so much of political science is based in Latin. The law,
Right.
the legal things are
Right.
Latin-ish, and it's not in Latin, but it comes from Latin, and so there's all of these terms and expressions and ways of talking in legalese that are Latin-ish. And so when I see things in Portuguese, I think, oh yeah, it's like this in English. It's this weird phrase, this weird way of talking that no one does in English unless you're a legal student.
Yeah, exactly.
Now,
But yeah, I'm sorry.
Justin,
Go ahead.
um, in two words is like it's like an English class game activity. I'm gonna give you two words to describe Brazilian students, pedagogically speaking, as students, not their personality, like cool and light. No, as students. Tell me what you think about Brazilian students.
In 2 words, whew, that is a tough one.
Not two words, but two qualities. It doesn't need to be two words, just two concepts. Two. How would you describe them?
Okay,
Us.
well, I would say honestly what Ryan mentioned earlier about Brazilian students saying, "Oh, English is so easy because it's simple." That's actually one thing that I would say it got to the point where I was just like I got tired of hearing that because I feel like that it's it's the mindset that gets me because that kind of approach to learning something I feel like is just kind of you're setting yourself up to underestimate what you're in for. You
And
know,
that and Portuguese is the hardest language that was ever invented. It's the
That-
hardest language in the world. Like space aliens brought it to us on stone tablets, and we're lucky that we could understand it. I can't believe that you can speak 3 words in Portuguese. How do you do it, man? Like, get out of here, Brazilian people. It's not that hard.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I was gonna say. That little kind of connection between, I guess, the attitude, and I don't know where does that come from. I mean,
I
do you
don't
think-
know.
I feel like some of it comes from the fact that I mean I've never been in like a public Brazilian school, but I have the impression that people just get overloaded with information. Thinking back to like high school and grade school, we don't learn a lot of grammar in American schools. At least I never did. I have the impression that Brazilians study too much, and so they like develop this kind of like fear. Oh my God, Portuguese is so difficult. Nobody can do it. So I guess that's one kind of thing. The relationship with that, the attitude, is kind of one thing. I would, if I could comment on or give advice to Brazilians as students, I would say, be careful with that. Be more. I don't know how to deal with that, but I totally agree with what you're saying, Ryan, and that's one thing. The other thing, I guess this is more specific to my experience and not necessarily applicable to all Brazilians, but I worked with a lot. Unife is primarily an engineering university, and so a lot of these engineering students also kind of have this attitude of like everything is science and engineering and I don't care about language and arts, and so they kind of sometimes have like this also kind of I think holds them back from truly actually being able to study and approach, or at least approach and study the language in a more adequate way, let's say.
Yeah, it's very, very different teaching teaching English to an engineer, and teaching English to a history teacher. Something.
Yeah, totally. I try to use like math analogies, like remember, guys, negative sentences in English are like multiplying negative numbers. -5 times -5 is a positive 25. So if we use 2 negatives in English, that's going to suggest a positive, right? But anyways, yeah, it is totally different. And I've, most of my students, at least when I was in Brazil, were engineering students. Now I work with more business professionals. I have students that are doctors, lawyers, historians and such, and it is a totally different experience. And just yeah.
Something you said is completely true. When we are in fourth grade, even before, we start learning about morphologically and like we have to analyze a sentence, and we learn about compound and simple sentences and periods and longer and subordinate, and we learn about all that when we are in the fourth, fifth. We start learning about it when in the fourth grade, and we have to. This is all of the things we do when we study Portuguese in school. We have to. Oh, so this is a subject. What is the core of the subject? What kind of subject that is? The object, is it direct or indirect? We have to do that for years. And
Right.
when we get to high school, we don't know how to do that. We still don't know how to do that because only Portuguese teachers know how to do that.
Okay. So this reminds me of something that I've told my students. I told Rodrigo for years, and a lot of them don't really believe me. And I want to ask you if you have the same experience as me, Justin. And it's that I never learned grammar ever in school. There was never once was there a grammar class. There was like literature class or writing class or reading class, but we never sat down and were like, okay, class, this is the present. No.
No, I had to
once.
learn all. I had to give myself we had a little bit of training in Indonesia, but I mostly just had to give myself a crash course to be able to teach. And this stuff you're talking about, Rodrigo, complex structures. I never knew that even existed in English until I got dumped that big, like 600-page TOEFL book.
I have it here.
Yeah, and then I was like, okay, so this does exist. I better figure out what this is and how to like teach it because. Yeah,
and in English, it gets more philosophical and open and crazy, man. In English, it's worse.
Another thing I've learned about English and teaching is English is very abstract. I mean, the way we use a lot of words and ideas and like phrasal verbs and stuff. I mean, it's a very abstract language. And so I think that's also something, I guess that's useful to keep in mind and that I try to tell. And now I've realized over the years, and I try to tell my Brazilian students is really, how to approach this because English is very abstract, the way we use a lot of words and ideas. But yeah. Oh, I was going to say one more thing. Like you, to answer your question, Ryan, I don't remember having any grammar classes. When I was in college and I had to take intensive grammar review for Spanish, I actually was better and more confident in my Spanish grammar than I was in my English grammar.
Yeah, no, it was the same. When I started teaching English in Brazil was the very first time that I even knew that this idea called the present perfect existed.
I remember one day I corrected Ryan. He said should have went.
Oh
should have went, and I said gone, Ryan, not went. And he said what? And I said I should have gone. Not should have went. And he said, what do you mean? I said, you should say I should have gone. And then he connected and said, yeah, sure, okay. Oh, but it's fine, should have went. I said, no, that's not fine. I meant it as a teacher.
Yeah.
And I said,
it's fine.
We do it all the time, man. It's fine. And
I had no idea what he was talking about.
Yeah.
I was like, what? No, I mean, I guess so. You can do it either way, right? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Sure. All right, moving on. Next thing. Like, no big deal.
Yeah. Exactly. Those are the things I admit I did the same thing, or I never knew the difference or knew what was, because those are the habits we pick up when we don't learn this stuff correctly. And for the folks back in Canby, should have went is totally normal, totally acceptable. And
native speakers, I believe that native speakers don't make mistakes. That's what I think.
Yeah, but I one day I corrected one of my friends, one of my American friends, Kate, and she she corrected me, Yeah, one day I said probably he don't, something like that. But I actually made a mistake. I actually said it wrong. Uh, it wasn't that I was so native like that I just dropped a he don't know. Uh, but then one day she made the same mistake or something similar, and I corrected her, and she said, "Oh no, I can I can make the mistake. You can't." And I said, "Okay, yeah, that's true. I got it. I understood." I said, "Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry."
Yeah, that's funny.
Cool. So then, what are you up to now? You still in Brazil, or what's up?
Yeah, so I'm in Mexico now. I kind of just elected to take a sabbatical. I'm calling it a sabbatical year. I'm teaching. I'm working completely as a freelancer. I work with article revision and translation, um, and I still teach. I actually, teach more than I revise or translate just because of the demand and stuff. But I'm still working with a lot of my students, just online, of
Hmm.
course, which would be the same as being in Itajuba anyway, right?
Yeah, what's the difference now?
Yeah. So I'm in Mexico for the time being. I'm gonna be here for
Whereabouts in Mexico did you go?
I'm in Mexico City at the moment. I was
Cool.
in a small beach town on the Pacific coast near Puerto Vallarta about a week ago. I guess it's only been a week since I've been in Mexico City. Yeah. So I'm just traveling around the world and still teaching to support myself and to fund my travels and stuff. And I'm also studying and preparing to go back to the United States to do my PhD next year. If all goes to plan, if I get accepted and stuff, I'd like to do my PhD in history.
That's
History,
cool, man.
political
I
science.
I started studying history. That was my first like major at college. But
Nice.
I realized that I really like history and I hate doing history. And I'm
Uh huh.
sure that you know the difference.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I did. I actually was a history major at one point too. But now, yeah, I mean, yeah, I got over that, I guess.
Okay. Well, good
But
luck.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Because I like was really excited to like go to class and was really excited to read the material, and I could even like write papers and do assignments. But then when it was like time to do a real research paper, I was like, I don't care. This is not
Yeah.
interesting for me.
Reading the finished product that historians write is a lot more interesting than reading all the stuff that they have to read in order to prepare
Yeah.
that.
And then even less interesting is producing something yourself
Uh-huh.
for me.
It's a very
I
time Takes a lot of
uh,
time.
yeah. It's too many details. I'm not a details guy. I'm sorry. I'm just not.
And you ended up studying political science. Was that your major?
Yeah. Luckily, a lot of the credits transferred. That was
Oh
nice.
no. Nice. And you studied at Seattle Pacific, right?
Seattle
No.
University. Seattle
Yeah.
University was a Jesuit school, which
Okay.
is interesting because then I ended up moving to a super Catholic country.
Yeah, yeah, I was just thinking that too. The Jesuit connection.
Um,
Has Ryan ever told you about the Mennonites, Rodrigo?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I would
Yes.
imagine.
Oh,
Must,
a question about Canby. Um, and this is a very, very, very strange question. No, not very, very, but it's a strange question. But it's a question about someone that is not American, that has never been to America, and that only knows America through movies and weird American people I know. Uh, okay, like Ryan, Kate, all the American people I knew are kind of weird, in a good way, in the best way. Okay,
oh,
Thanks.
good.
yeah, not you, Ryan, not you, Ryan. So, um, something I really like about America, about small towns in America, is that it seems to me when I watch movies, series, shows, it seems to me that every small town has a thing. Like for example, when I remember when I watched National Lampoon's Vacation, they they were traveling around America, and there was like, oh look, Daddy, the biggest chair in the world.
All
Let's go
right.
visit that. And then look, Daddy, the biggest donut in the world is in that town. And there's always something, always something. And it's that scene when I was younger. That seemed just silly and weird. And then my brother kind of explained that to me, and he said that he admires because, like, you guys maybe you don't have anything, and then you create something. You create opportunities. People come here. We have the biggest chair, something like that, and people go, and so that's something really cool. Is there anything in Canby? Like, what is Canby's thing other than Ryan?
Other than Ryan, I don't know. I can't think of anything.
I mean,
related
we have General
to-
Canby Days,
Yeah.
the fair. The fair is a big
fair-
one.
Oh, the fair is kind of a big deal because it's the county fair. It's not just Canby, but people come from like all over.
And it's the third largest county in the state. There's a lot of people there.
There you go. Now you sound like
There
an
it is.
American.
I was before you said that. I was thinking, next to Canby, there's an even smaller town called Aurora, and that's actually where my address was growing up. My home address where my parents live is still Aurora, Oregon, and Aurora, like I said, even smaller than Canby. I don't even think Aurora has 1,000 people, but Aurora would bring people in from like all over the state, sometimes
The
even
country.
for antiques. They were
Yeah.
famous for antique shops. People love to go there and buy antiques. It's
Yeah, no. Like my grandma loves to do antiques, and she'll bring her friends from Idaho, which is like 8 hours away, and it's a different friend every time, and they're super excited to get the chance to come to Aurora, Oregon, to go antiquing for the day. They drive all the way.
Yeah, so that was the first thing that came to mind before you mentioned the fair. So yeah, Canby's thing is the fair, and then right next door, Aurora's got antique shops.
Yeah.
Must be tough times for antique shoppers that can't. I don't know what the lockdown is like though. Antique shopping.
I bet. I was in this like lockdown. We started watching a bunch of TV shows again that we'd already watched, and one of them that we watched is Parks and Rec. Do you know this show, Justin?
Yeah.
I think that Canby is actually very similar to Pawnee.
Yeah, totally. It is it has a lot of the same type of stuff going on.
Like everybody knows each other. It's very nice. Like the scandals, the bad things that happen are actually like good things.
Like in Pawnee, for example, they had like a pony.
Little
was like-
Sebastian.
Little Sebastian, yeah.
So that was one of the things in Pawnee, and they had like a fight with the other. I forgot the name of the other.
Eagleton.
Town. Eagleton, yeah.
Wouldn't Malala be our Eagleton?
Totally.
For sure.
Malala. That's where my mom grew up. Yeah, and my
Yeah.
grandparents.
That's where I spent the beginning of my life.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. I moved to Canby when I was 7. So I'm a secret Malalan.
Nice.
Yeah. So, well, do you have anything else you want to ask, Justin? Anything you're curious about me or Rodrigo?
I was gonna ask you, I guess. Well, both of you, since we talked a little bit about music earlier. I see you've got some guitar. Are those guitars, or are they violon
no.
caipira, maybe?
Yeah,
Viola
Rodrigo
Caipira.
has.
Do you play?
Yeah, I do.
Very nice. That's a beautiful instrument.
Yeah, it's 10.
What-
In English, I found that there's a Brazilian guy that recorded a CD, and he released it in English version, and he calls it a Brazilian 10-string guitar.
Yeah.
Brazilian acoustic 10-string. I don't remember the other of adjectives
Something like that.
in this one.
What's the tuning? Are they tuned in octaves? Are they
They tuned in octaves. Yeah, it's like 5 pairs,
5 pairs?
and it's open E.
Okay, nice.
And the name of the tunings are very, very Kaipira, very like this one is the big onion. And then if it's tuned, and there's another one that's down the river, and then up the river, and
Nice. Those are
uh,
very
yeah.
names.
But this is C, B, E, G sharp, B, E. It's just an open E,
Okay.
and it just sounds beautiful.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
are beautiful. We got a guy we know of. He's a guitarist in Itajubá, and he also plays violon caipira, who played a song on our first album. It's a
Oh.
beautiful instrument, very nice.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that sometimes Rodrigo plays on his Instagram.
Oh, nice.
If
Very
you
cool.
follow him on Instagram, you might get to catch him playing some guitar.
Cool. Nice. And then Ryan, I know you're a musician too. What are you doing these days? No.
No.
You were. You play
yeah.
in a jazz band?
Yeah, I used to play a lot of things, but like
Uh-huh.
very amateurishly, because I just didn't practice, man. You got to practice a lot to be a musician, and I didn't.
True.
But I enjoyed it. I really liked the experience of learning how to play trumpet, and I taught myself how to badly play piano.
Nice.
And when I was unemployed on Bainbridge, like between when I met my wife and when I came to Brazil, we had a electric organ,
Oh, nice.
like an old one from the 60s or 70s that used to be my grandpa's. And
Okay.
he had stopped using it. I stole it. I liberated it.
Yes.
Yes. And took it there and messed around on it. And I learned to play it well enough that I actually set up a Skype call with her, and I played for her some old sappy 70s songs and sang to her on the electric organ.
Nice.
Like a Supertramp song, Supertramp?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I did that. But today I don't do anything. But I really appreciate like learning musical theory, which I
Oh, yeah.
did, which I learned on the trumpet.
Yeah.
Justin, you remember when you said you're talking about
Just a
Ryan.
second, guys. One of the guys in the chat actually has a question, and it's a
Okay.
question I'm actually curious about. Is that in English we call the notes like A, B, C, D, E, and in Portuguese they're do, re, mi, fa. What are they in Indonesia?
Oh, my God.
Ooh, that's
know?
a good question.
They have a different scale, probably, right?
That was the first thing that came to mind that I was going to say. They have some cool, they call it gamelan. Gamelan is very traditional. They have Javanese gamelan, Balinese. If you're going right next door, the next island over is Bali, Balinese gamelan. They actually have different scales that are not perfectly in line with, the same intervals of do, re, mi, and such. But when I played, I would go play my acoustic guitar sometimes. It was actually pretty cool. Sometimes the students would come to me like, hey, I want to sing this song in English. Can you play it for me? And most of the contact I had with music with Indonesians was in English. So I never actually truly learned. That's a really good question. But if I had to guess, they would reference things that they would use the letters C major, this type
Okay.
of stuff. So I don't know in like official terms what they use, but they do have other scales I know, and I also don't know how they call. Gamelan is like, have you guys ever heard of gamelan or ever
No.
seen?
I haven't.
It's basically just like percussion. They have like they're almost like little pots. They look like little round pots. And it's almost just kind of like a little drum set. You have all these different it's very percussion. You play with sticks, and you have the pots are made of like brass, or maybe bronze, and it's basically just kind of a percussive, arrangement that they do. That's actually a good question though that I'm gonna have to research now.
It's a very good question. Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
thanks, Brenner, for the question.
And sorry from me for not having a good answer.
That was a specific one.
Yeah.
That is a very specific. Yeah, that was a good question.
Cool. So, well, what were you about to say before I interrupted you? Do you remember?
No, when you talked about history, you liked history, you like studying history, but you don't really like doing it. I felt the same about music.
Mm.
I've always played in many bands, and I grew up on grunge, Nirvana, and Pearl Jam, and Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, they're great musicians, but Nirvana not quite. It's more visceral, it's more raw and
Yeah, I
feeling.
know exactly what you mean. I just watched the unplugged concert yesterday, and I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
So
I was gonna say the fact that you can make that distinguish that tells me that you have good music sensibility.
yeah,
Sorry Nirvana, but
exactly.
They're
So
wonderful, but they're not the best musicians.
exactly. So in technical terms, when you talk about technique and all of that, but so I started learning music. I studied social science for 2 years, and then I stopped and I said no, I want to be rich, so I'm going to study music. That's what I decided to do, right? A smart move. Yeah. So I went on to study music, and after 6 months I was like, nah, I love music, I love playing in a band, and I love jamming, but actually learning, I really didn't like it. It made music more boring to me. So it's just something I'd like to say. Remember because Ryan said the history thing.
Yeah.
Do you know music theory, Justin?
Yeah, but actually, it's funny you say that about your experience because when I started learning, I mean, I actually started learning like at school. We had some introduction classes to keyboard, and we learned the notes, and we learned Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and stuff. But then I started playing the besides the little bit of keyboard that I was introduced to. My first real instrument that I learned to like read music and play was the clarinet in the '91 school band. Um, and so I learned a little bit of that music theory, and I was the same way. I thought it was boring. I didn't want to learn it. I mean, I was like 10 years old, so what kid really wants to learn that? But then when I was 15, I first picked up a bass and started playing with my friends in a band. I mean, I learned in a very informal, totally not correct by musical, theory and technique terms. My friends played guitar, and they just told me, "Oh, play the third fret. We're on G." I was like, "What is G?" "Play the third fret." Like, okay. So I like really didn't learn anything. I learned how to read tabs, right, which is
Yeah,
the shortcut
how I
for
did
any
it.
rock musician or anybody that wants to take a shortcut to learning bass or guitar. You just learn tabs, and it's really easy. But then I started doing more of like, I guess, a traditional or a technically correct study of music theory when I was in Indonesia because I had a lot of free time and not a lot of stuff to do. Most people my age, I was 23 when I got there, and most 23-year-old Indonesians are either married or having kids. And so I didn't really have a lot of friends and people. My best friends were like the little neighborhood kids, play soccer with them. And I know it sounds weird, but it's like I had nobody else to hang out with. So I started studying scales and stuff, and then I started studying piano. And that's when I guess between studying guitar theory and piano over the last few years, I have learned a lot, and I actually really enjoy studying music theory. It's yeah. Besides the how useful it is in its application and and especially because playing in a band, writing music, it's something that's very useful. But I actually kind of enjoy. I'm kind of a nerd. I also love grammar. Like for all that, I used to not
Mm.
care and not know it. I've come to appreciate it. And music theory is kind of like the grammar,
Grammar.
right?
Like a whole
music.
other language, music.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
totally is. It totally is. So
Um,
yeah, I used to. I mean, I would say my I'm not the most advanced and stuff, but you know, if people throw out terms like modal interchange, and E9, blah, I can keep up. 10 years ago, when I was first playing, I had no idea what that meant, but now I can keep up. I can hang out, and I actually really enjoy studying music theory. Yeah, but when I first started learning, I was like you, Rodrigo. I really didn't like it. I really didn't know or learning. I learned from studying tabs and stuff, watching videos.
Nice,
Yeah.
very nice.
Cool. Well, I think we can wrap up here. But I do have one more question for Justin, and
Okay.
it's like you say that you're traveling around the world, and you're gonna study history next. So I guess it's a two-part question. But like, what is the country that you're most looking forward to getting to? You have like a
Okay.
plan, or are you just gonna like see what happens, or do you?
I kind of have a plan, but it's kind of going to depend on a lot of stuff with this pandemic.
Sure.
Going.
So what is the place that you're very excited? You like, man, I really want to get to this place.
Yeah, Mexico is one of them, and I specifically came here because I started studying Nahuatl. Nahuatl is the language of the Aztecs, and so my plan is to go. Yeah, I want to study, like, I want to do my PhD in Mesoamerican history and stuff.
Okay.
So that's been kind of, that had been on my kind of list, you know, for a while. And the other one is Egypt. If all goes to plan, I'm going to be going to Egypt in June. So I'm pretty excited about that as well.
Very cool. Well, that was my other question was, what are you going to do your PhD in? So you answered both parts for me. Thanks, man.
Nice. Cool.
And unless somebody else has a question, I think we're ready to wrap it up.
No,
All right.
fine.
So thanks, Justin. It
Yeah,
was good
thank you guys.
to see you after all this
You too.
time.
Likewise.
And thanks everybody for watching. Thanks, Brenner, for that question again. That was a really great question. And we'll see everybody next week. I don't exactly know who our guest is yet, but we'll have somebody cool. Probably not as cool as Justin. This guy is super impressive. Studying Mesoamerican history, studying the Aztecs, going to Egypt, been to Indonesia. Jeez, who is this guy? Making me feel lazy about my life. But anyway, thanks everybody again for watching, and we'll see you all next week. Adios.
Thanks, guys. Take care.